At 40,000 feet, the sky is not blue, it is blackened, thin, and endless. A place where human beings were never meant to exist. The air outside Flight 917 was so cold it could shatter metal, so empty it could steal breath in seconds. Inside the aircraft, however, life felt ordinary, artificial, safe. Seatbelt signs glowed softly. Overhead bins hummed. A flight attendant laughed at something a passenger said in row 12. Coffee steamed. A businessman rehearsed a presentation. A newlywed couple held hands, unaware this would be the last calm moment of their lives. Then the sky blinked. It began with a vibration so subtle. Most people felt it more than heard it, a tremor that traveled through the floor, into bones, into instinct. A wine glass rattled. A laptop screen shook. Somewhere near the wing, a sound like tearing metal cut through the steady roar of the engines. The right engine coughed. Once, twice. Then it screamed. The scream wasn't loud, it was wrong. A high-pitched wail that didn't belong in the sky. The plane lurched, not violently, but just enough for heads to lift and eyes to search for reassurance. Before anyone could speak, before fear could fully form, the second engine died. Not exploded, not burning, just stopped. The roar that had carried 300 lives across the sky vanished, replaced by something far more terrifying: silence. At 40,000 feet, silence is not peaceful. It is predatory. The aircraft continued forward, momentum masking the truth for a few seconds. But gravity never forgets. The nose dipped. Loose objects lifted from trays. A pen floated, spinning slowly, as if confused by the sudden absence of certainty. In the cockpit, warning lights detonated into existence. Alarms screamed, red, amber, messages, stacked on screens faster than the pilots could read them. "Engine flame out," the first officer said, his voice tight. "Both engines," the captain replied, already reaching for switches that no longer mattered. They tried the checklist. They tried the restart. They tried again. Nothing.
Flight 917 was now a 180-ton glider, falling through air too thin to forgive mistakes. In the cabin, fear spread like a living thing. A woman gasped when her drink drifted upward. A child laughed at first, then stopped when his mother pulled him close. Trembling, oxygen masks did not deploy yet, but the pressure felt wrong, heavy, like the sky itself was pressing down. The plane dropped another 1,000 feet. A man whispered, "This isn't normal." Another said louder, "What's happening?" Flight attendants moved fast, smiles stretched thin, voices trained to sound calm even when the ground was rushing closer at thousands of feet per minute. "Please remain seated," one said, gripping a seat back as turbulence shook the cabin. "Everything is under control." But it wasn't. In the cockpit, the captain made the call he had prayed he would never have to make. He pressed the intercom. The chime echoed through the cabin, soft, almost polite. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice began, steady but stripped of warmth. "This is your captain speaking." Every conversation died instantly. "We are experiencing a significant technical issue. Both engines are currently offline. Our crew is working the problem." Offline. Not delayed. Not malfunctioning. Offline. A word that landed like a dropped plate in the silence that followed. Someone cried out. Someone prayed. Someone laughed hysterically, the sound sharp and out of place. Hands clutched armrests as the aircraft shuddered again, air screaming past the fuselage now that nothing pushed back. At this altitude, there is no margin, no casual solution, no place to pull over. The cabin lights flickered. Flight 917 passed through a layer of cloud, white swallowing the windows. The outside world erased as if the plane were descending into nothingness itself. Another 1,000 feet lost. The captain spoke again, more urgently now. "If there is anyone on board with aviation, engineering, or mechanical experience, especially military or commercial aircraft systems, please notify a flight attendant immediately." That sentence changed everything. It was no longer a routine emergency. It was a plea. Eyes darted around the cabin, searching for heroes, for uniforms, for someone who looked like they belonged in a moment like this. Strangers locked gazes, silently asking, "Is it you? Is it me?" Most looked away. Some shook their heads. At 40,000 feet, courage is a rare currency. The plane dropped again, faster this time. Seatbelts tightened, across chests as gravity reclaimed what the engines no longer held. The sound of rushing air grew louder, an invisible river pulling them downward. A man in row 5 whispered goodbye into his phone, though there was no signal. A woman clutched a rosary so hard her knuckles bled. A teenager typed a final message unsent, fingers shaking. And in seat 28B, a quiet man stared straight ahead. He had felt the vibration before anyone else, had recognized the sound for what it was, not fear, not fate, but failure. His jaw tightened as numbers ran through his mind. Altitude, airspeed, time. He did not panic. He stood. As the aircraft continued its silent fall, as 300 lives balanced on physics and hope, the man stepped into the aisle, unknown, uncelebrated, unnoticed by most. But gravity had already noticed them all, and it was not waiting. The ground no longer felt distant. It was no longer an abstract idea somewhere beneath the clouds. It was real, textured, rushing toward them with merciless speed. Mountains etched themselves into view, shadows stretching like claws across the earth. The aircraft groaned as if it knew what waited below. Inside the cockpit, every second weighed a lifetime. The left engine's weak rotation flickered on the display, unstable and fragile like a dying heartbeat. The man watched it carefully, knowing that asking more from it might kill it entirely. "Hold her steady," he said. "Any sudden input and we lose everything." The captain nodded, knuckles white around the yoke. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he didn't blink. He couldn't. In the cabin, oxygen masks swayed as the plane shook violently. The descent had become undeniable now. Passengers could feel it in their stomachs, in the way their bodies pressed against seatbelts, in the scream of air ripping past the fuselage. A flight attendant fell to her knees in the aisle, bracing herself as turbulence slammed the aircraft sideways. She crawled forward, shouting commands that were swallowed by chaos. Brace position. Heads down. Stay down! Some listened. Some froze. A man in row 30 clutched a photograph of his daughter. A woman whispered her husband's name over and over like a spell. A soldier closed his eyes, not in fear but in recognition. He had felt this before. In the cockpit, the warning horn blared again. "Terrain," the system barked. "Pull up." The captain ignored it. "We don't pull up," the man said quietly. "We ride it." They broke through the final layer of cloud. Sunlight exploding into the cockpit, harsh, blinding, cruelly beautiful. Below them lay the airstrip. Cracked concrete, overgrown edges, barely long enough to forgive even a perfect landing. "This thing hasn't been used in decades," the first officer said, disbelief cracking his voice. "It was built for war," the man replied. "It'll hold." The engine sputtered. Everyone felt it. The plane shuddered as the weak thrust wavered, threatening to vanish entirely. The captain instinctively pulled back. "No," the man snapped, the first edge of urgency breaking through his calm. "Let it fall. Speed is life right now." The captain forced himself to comply, lowering the nose just enough to regain airspeed. The runway rushed closer, expanding rapidly in the windshield. "Landing gear," the captain said. The first officer hesitated. "If the hydraulics fail—" "They won't," the man interrupted. "I rerouted power. Drop them now." The lever moved. For one horrifying second, nothing happened. Then thunk. One gear. Another. Then the final reassuring vibration as all three locked into place. A cheer erupted from the cockpit, cut short by another violent jolt of turbulence. "We're too high," the first officer said. "No," the man said, eyes narrowing. "We're fast." He reached for the flaps. "These speeds—" "I know." He deployed them incrementally, fighting drag without bleeding too much lift. The aircraft responded sluggishly, like a wounded animal refusing to die. In the cabin, the sudden change pitched passengers forward. Screams echoed as the plane tilted steeply, nose down, runway filling every window. People could see it now. The end. The moment. Some screamed. Some went silent. Some pressed their foreheads to seatbacks, waiting for impact. A child cried for his mother. A mother begged God. A man whispered, "Thank you," though he didn't know to whom. The ground rushed up. 30 seconds, the man said. The left engine whined, then coughed. "No," the captain breathed. "Hold," the man commanded. "Just hold." 20 seconds. The aircraft crossed the runway threshold far too fast, far too heavy. There would be no go-around, no second attempt. 10 seconds. The engine died completely. Total silence returned, broken only by wind and alarms. "Now," the man said. The captain flared. The plane slammed into the runway. Metal screamed. Sparks exploded as rubber met concrete at impossible speed. The aircraft bounced once, twice, then slammed down again. Harder, teeth-rattling, bone-crushing. In the cabin, bodies lurched violently. Overhead bins burst open, bags raining down. A woman screamed as her head snapped forward. Someone prayed out loud, voice breaking. The plane veered left. "Rudder!" the man shouted. The captain corrected. Fighting the uneven ground, the damaged gear, the sheer momentum that wanted to carry them. Straight into the trees at the runway's end. Brakes screamed. Smoke poured past the windows. The aircraft shuddered violently as a tire blew. Then another, but the captain held the line, muscles screaming in protest. They were running out of runway. The end rushed closer. Grass, dirt, wreckage waiting just beyond. "Stay with me," the man said, voice steady despite the chaos. The captain gritted his teeth and pulled every remaining ounce of control from the aircraft. The plane slowed. 500 feet, 200, 100. Then finally, mercifully, they stopped. Silence crashed over everything. Not the deadly silence from before, but a stunned, sacred quiet, broken only by sobs, coughing, and the crackle of cooling metal. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone in the cabin screamed, not in fear but in disbelief. "We're alive!" The words spread like wildfire. Crying, laughter, shouting. People hugged strangers, hands shaking, faces soaked with tears. In the cockpit, the captain slumped forward, overcome. The first officer laughed and cried at the same time. The man removed his hands from the panel and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Outside, smoke drifted into the sky. Inside, 300 lives sat breathing, shaking, alive. Gravity had fought them with everything it had. And lost. For a moment, the man stayed there, hand resting on the child's back, breathing in the smell of jet fuel and dust and life. Then he stood. As firefighters began boarding from the rear, the man slipped toward the side hatch, unnoticed by most in the chaos. A paramedic saw him and called out, "Sir, are you injured?" "No," he said. "Name for our report?" He paused, just long enough to smile. "Just an American," he replied. "That's enough." The hatch opened. He descended the emergency ladder and stepped onto the cracked runway, boots hitting the ground with a finality that felt unreal. The earth felt solid beneath him. Behind him, cheers rose again as passengers were guided out. Wrapped in blankets, reunited with each other and with life. News crews shouted questions. Cameras zoomed in on faces streaked with tears. But the man walked away from the noise. He crossed the field slowly, every step carrying the weight of what had almost been lost. In the distance stood an old fence, rusted and broken, marking the edge of the forgotten airstrip. Beyond it waited a dirt road and a truck parked beneath a crooked tree. A young soldier guarding the perimeter noticed him and snapped to attention. "Sir, were you on that plane?" The man nodded. The soldier swallowed. "They're saying someone from the cabin helped land it." The man looked back once at the wounded aircraft, at the smoke thinning into the sky, at 300 people who would sleep in their own beds tonight. "Then they're right," he said. He climbed into the truck and drove away before the soldier could ask anything more. By evening, the story was everywhere. Miracle landing at 40,000 feet. All passengers survive after dual-engine failure. Unknown hero in cabin saves Flight 917. Experts debated. Analysts argued. Simulations were run, slowed down, replayed. Pilots shook their heads and said, it shouldn't have worked. But it had. 300 families gathered that night, holding each other longer than usual. 300 lives continued, unfinished arguments postponed, birthdays restored, ordinary tomorrows returned. Some would never forget the man in the leather jacket. Most would never know his name. And somewhere in a quiet town far from headlines, the man sat alone on a porch as the sun set, the sky painted golden red, peaceful, forgiving. He listened to the wind. He thought of altitude and silence and gravity. Then he stood, went inside, and lived the rest of his life exactly as he always had. Unknown, uncelebrated, and content knowing that when the sky had gone quiet at 40,000 feet, he had stood up. And that had been enough. The first sound after survival was crying. Not the sharp, panicked screams from before, but the deep, shaking sobs of people whose bodies were only now realizing they were still alive. It rolled through the cabin in waves, mixed with laughter that bordered on hysteria and prayers spoken too fast to be proper. Flight attendants unbuckled themselves slowly, testing the world as if it might disappear again. One of them pressed her forehead to the wall and whispered, "Thank you," over and over, tears streaking down her face. Smoke drifted past the windows, thin and gray, curling into the sky like the last breath of something that had almost died. In the cockpit, the captain sat motionless, hands still wrapped around the controls, as though letting go might undo everything. "We're down," the first officer said quietly, disbelief trembling in his voice. "We're actually down." The man in the leather jacket stepped back from the panel. His legs finally felt heavy. His heart, which had stayed calm through physics and fire and falling, now began to pound as adrenaline released its grip. He nodded once. "You did well." The captain turned to him, eyes red. "We did well?" His voice cracked. "You saved this plane." The man shook his head. "You flew it. I just pointed." The cockpit door burst open as a flight attendant rushed in. Her composure finally broken. "Everyone's alive," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "All of them. They're asking for you." The man didn't answer. Outside, emergency sirens grew louder. Fire crews, ambulances, military vehicles kicking up dust as they raced toward the crippled aircraft. Helicopters circled overhead, blades thundering the air. Somewhere beyond the runway, cameras were already arriving, hungry for a miracle. The man glanced at the windshield, at the growing crowd, at the sunlight glinting off emergency lights. "Open the side hatch," he said. The captain frowned. "What? You should stay. They're going to want your name." "The airline, the FAA." "I know," the man said gently. "That's why I won't." The first officer stared at him. "Sir, people deserve to know who saved them." The man met his gaze. "They don't need my name to live their lives." He stepped past them before they could argue. In the cabin, the reaction was immediate when passengers saw him. It began with a whisper. "That's him." Then louder. "That's the man from the cockpit." Applause erupted, raw, thunderous, unstoppable. People stood despite trembling legs. Hands reached out. Someone tried to hug him. Someone else grabbed his sleeve, crying. "Thank you," a woman sobbed. "You saved my children," a man said, voice breaking. "You're a hero," someone shouted. The man raised his hands gently, calming them like waves. "Please," he said. "Sit down. Help each other. Emergency crews are coming." A child ran up to him, the same boy from earlier. "You said we wouldn't die." The man knelt, eyes softening. "I meant it." The boy threw his arms around him. For a moment, the man stayed there, hand resting on the child's back, breathing in the smell of jet fuel and dust and life. Then he stood. As firefighters began boarding from the rear, the man slipped toward the side hatch, unnoticed by most in the chaos. A paramedic saw him and called out, "Sir, are you injured?" "No," he said. "Name for our report?" He paused, just long enough to smile. "Just an American," he replied. "That's enough." The hatch opened. He descended the emergency ladder and stepped onto the cracked runway, boots hitting the ground with a finality that felt unreal. The earth felt solid beneath him. Behind him, cheers rose again as passengers were guided out, wrapped in blankets, reunited with each other and with life. News crews shouted questions. Cameras zoomed in on faces streaked with tears. But the man walked away from the noise. He crossed the field slowly, every step carrying the weight of what had almost been lost. In the distance stood an old fence, rusted and broken, marking the edge of the forgotten airstrip. Beyond it waited a dirt road and a truck parked beneath a crooked tree. A young soldier guarding the perimeter noticed him and snapped to attention. "Sir, were you on that plane?" The man nodded. The soldier swallowed. "They're saying someone from the cabin helped land it." The man looked back once at the wounded aircraft, at the smoke thinning into the sky, at 300 people who would sleep in their own beds tonight. "Then they're right," he said. He climbed into the truck and drove away before the soldier could ask anything more. By evening, the story was everywhere. Miracle landing at 40,000 feet. All passengers survive after dual-engine failure. Unknown hero in cabin saves Flight 917. Experts debated. Analysts argued. Simulations were run, slowed down, replayed. Pilots shook their heads and said, "It shouldn't have worked." But it had. 300 families gathered that night, holding each other longer than usual. 300 lives continued, unfinished arguments postponed, birthdays restored, ordinary tomorrows returned. Some would never forget the man in the leather jacket. Most would never know his name. And somewhere in a quiet town far from headlines, the man sat alone on a porch as the sun set, The sky painted golden red, peaceful, forgiving. He listened to the wind. He thought of altitude and silence and gravity. Then he stood, went inside, and lived the rest of his life exactly as he always had. Unknown, uncelebrated, and content knowing that when the sky had gone quiet at 40,000 feet, he had stood up. And that had been enough.